Hello. Hello, everybody. How you doing? I hope you've enjoyed the morning so far. Some brilliant conversations, some really interesting presentations, and some really gnarly and knotty challenges. My name is Mark Shayler. I'm one of the directors of Springfield Agri. I've been working in sustainability for 32 years now, working in innovation, change, working in agriculture and food tangentially, and I'm absolutely delighted to host this next 40 minutes of conversation, because I don't know about you, but this is all about doing stuff at the ground level. This is all about getting your hands dirty, and that's what I want to talk about today. So I'm joined on the panel. We've got an incredible group of people. I'm absolutely delighted to have, and I'll start introducing first. We've got Ian and Emma Riley, current custodians of the land. That's how they describe themselves, and I absolutely love that. We don't own it, we look after it. They live on a site in the main farmhouse with their 3 children, whilst Emma's parents, Jean and Tony, Gazegill farmers throughout the 1900s, live next door with nephew Sam. The Robinson family have resided and farmed the land for nearly 500 years. Just think about that, 500 years. We have now got attention spans of less than 3 seconds, and they've looked after the same piece of land for 500 years. That is astonishing. Next up, we've got David Lord. David is farming 700 hectares of mainly arable land in the northeast Essex coast with varying soil types. His family made the move into regenerative agriculture and farming systems in 2014. That's early. You're a trendsetter, David, and I very much enjoy that about you. Having realized that they face this perfect storm of rising costs, increasing the prevalence of weeds, pests and diseases, and an over-reliance on chemical controls. Just throwing more stuff at it is like shouting louder in a storm. It's just not going to help. So a complete about-face and change. The system wasn't sustainable, and the solutions they needed revolved around the way we treat and use our soils and the diversity of crops and habitat. Thank you, David. Welcome. And then we've also got Adam Driver. You heard from Adam earlier. Adam Driver is a partner in the family business Driver Farms, managing land for numerous clients in West Suffolk, beautiful part of the world. Driver Farms is focused on farming systems that reduce our reliance on bought-in solutions and increasing profitability. This is all based around our soil and the ecosystem. And what I loved about Adam was when he was talking about why he jumped into regenerative agriculture, he was dead straight. He said, to make more money. And to make more money means to make more change. And that's what we have to do. And then last but not least, we've got my good friend, Harry Holden. Harry initially trained in agriculture in Stoneleigh at Royal Agricultural College, and he went into practical farm work for 2 years. But then he started an agricultural contracting business and expanded into the food industry. He's an entrepreneur, isn't he? Just look at him. He's got ideas popping out the top of his head, left, right, and center. And that business was sold, and then he ran food factories at all levels. He spans the ground right the way through to the plate. And that gives Harry a really unique approach and a unique insight to some of these problems. And Harry's a partner, a director of Springfield Agri, which he sees as the opportunity to put regenerative agriculture at the center of farming and form part of this alliance or global shift to solve the global warming problem. Those of you that saw David Attenborough's video yesterday, it could not have been starker or more frightening. This is serious stuff. And I've got incredible guests, 6 incredible guests to talk about these challenges. How is everybody?
We're all well.
Oh, good. Okay, so
we're all well, thank you.
We've had some great questions from the audience already, so I'm going to run through a few of those, and then if there's any more that pop up, someone will tell me about those, and then I've got a few as well. Now, the first question that we had is really prescient, actually, and I very much enjoyed the way it was framed. So this is from Jean McKendry. Jean asks, we've seen some really poor advice on soil health being given by, inverted commas, hers, not mine, advisors who have no particular training or expertise. How can we ensure that advisors have appropriate training as is required for fertilizer advisors? Although there's probably a bias there, isn't there? How can we ensure that soil health experts can offer training to farmers effectively and ideally at no cost? How would you like to receive such training and help with things like soil testing as a farmer? Now, I'm going to ask that to all of the farmers, but I'm going to start with Emma. Emma, what are your views on that?
I think Ian's far better at describing this. I'm going to pass it over to Ian.
I think it's something that sort of fell to me on the farm a lot. when a facts advisor comes out, they're looking at your soil quality. They're looking at really what they can sell you to improve that soil in any way, or again, what fertilizers they can sell you. So I think they're not best placed to actually sort of advise us on soil health. They have a vested interest in selling you something that you probably don't need. I mean, some of the ones we've used in the past, did deal in natural products, calcified seaweed, things like that, which are great. But we have an area of outstanding natural beauty, and the Pendle Hill Landscape Partnership has botanists at hand who will come out to us, advise us, help us. I mean, 10 years ago, we were short of some bits in one of our species, rich meadows, and they came out and said, yellow rattle is your answer. We put yellow rattle in, and the rest was history. It improved the other species, it starved some of the grasses out. Just generally, it's finding the advice.
Our local group is National Lottery funded, so it's quite neutral. It's a safe place to go.
Yeah, I think it's difficult to actually find nationally, a soil advisor that might not have a vested interest in selling you something.
I think that's so true. And I was really struck, Emma, by one of the things that you said in the pre-conversation. You were talked about the things that you were taught, and they're exactly in contradiction to the things that we should be doing. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I went to agricultural college, and we did crop science and soil science, and we were taught that ploughing and reseeding and digging down and seeing the water courses, and how if the soil's been starved of oxygen, it's all gone rusty and orange, and we've got to get rid of that by ploughing. But
ammonium nitrates and
but our land here is over 700 years of ridge and furrow, and the drains are perfect. Why do you need to dig something up? Because as soon as you ruin that top structure, as soon as it rains, the soil's in the stream and it's gone. It just seems bonkers.
We've just watched our neighbour who's ploughed again for winter wheat. We've just watched his field go past us in the river this last 2 days. So it just shows what damage and how much of good soil we lose. It's now in Blackpool. So
permaculture and just building up on the top is far easier than heaps of diesel ploughing every time.
Completely. And just a really quickie, would you advise people to do that at home as well? If we've got some hobby farmers or some normal householders here, no dig is the way they should go in their garden, or
no dig. There's a chap on I think he's on Facebook, Charles Dowding, No Dig Gardening, absolutely brilliant, and he just runs sort of free seminars, but permaculture, no dig, really good way forward. And get things together, companion planting. I know I always had an argument with a college lecturer about companion planting, and he said there's no scientific evidence. I said, well, if it works, do you need evidence? If you get a better crop, if it keeps the aphids away, then it's doing something right. We don't need the evidence.
Seems that way to me. Before I come to the farmers again, Harry, you wanted to step in.
Yes, I think this is a very difficult point, but something that we really need to look at is that the knowledge around soil science is fairly narrow and it's fairly young. Globalin, which is the glue that holds soil together, was not discovered till 1998. So prior to that, it was unknown how soil kept its structure. And it's only really since 1998 that they started to get some kind of an understanding of how soil actually works and the mechanics of it. I think the issue about vested interest is a huge point. At the end of the day, fertilizer companies want to sell fertilizer, pesticide companies want to sell pesticide. So they're not going to tell you that that's not the best way of doing it, because that's what they're employed to do. There is a lot of information, or I say there's a lot of information. There is starting to become a lot of information. And there's a business called the Soil Web who do some lovely cartoons which go through all the science behind soil, how you can get away from using pesticides, how you control weeds in a natural way. And I'm sure that as this movement picks up more and more impetus, more and more of that information is going to become really freely available. Of course, you're always going to have to make your own decisions about whether that suits what you're trying to achieve and whether it suits the type of agriculture you're trying to get involved in. But as I say, it's quite a young science, and certainly prior to 1998, most of what was actually put out is perhaps not relevant today.
That's interesting. Thanks, Harry. And you say it's a young science, and indeed it is a young science, but indigenous populations have known this stuff for millennia. You know, this is the young science that we're building on the top of the shoulders of giants, and we need to acknowledge that in everything that we do. But David and Adam, I'm really fascinated in your views here. How would you best like to be educated? Not that you're not uneducated, but how would you like to have your knowledge lifted? And picking up on Emma and Ian's point, would you now use a botanist to help you, and would you have done 20 years ago? I'll go to David first.
Thanks, Mark. Yeah, I think you've got to take it back a step and ask yourself, what am I measuring and why am I measuring it? And for us on our journey, you know, I want to keep an eye on my soils, make sure they're functioning right and that they are improving and regenerating. So I want a test that's going to reflect that, and actually doing it yourself, doing it. I do a VEST test, which is just a visual examination of the soil. You can dig it up. You can do you can grade the structure yourself just visually. It's not exact science, but it doesn't need to be, and it gets you out there. It gets you in the soil, and you build up a picture in your own mind, and you're able to compare and contrast your own findings in your own fields as you're going along. You don't need an expert to come in and tell you whether it's good or bad, because it's sort of self-evident. But what we also do is we use an independent firm to actually do a very detailed lab test on our soil, detailing all of the microbiology, the fungi that's present, organic matter, all the things which we need to know as regenerative farmers. But as Emma was saying, none of the things that we used to have on a soil test when we were just looking at how much fertilizer we needed to buy.
It's interesting, isn't it? So what we're measuring has changed, but not as fast as it needs to change. And what about the ability of the sector to support that kind of analysis and measurement? Is there a gap between what you need and what's available?
Well, I don't think so, because I think the how to do it is there. I mean, I've been involved with the HDB with a couple of their monitor farms, and they've been, we've had some really good sessions on farmers actually learning how to assess their own soils and develop that understanding. And I think if you're going to go down the route of employing more technology or some expert advice or whatever, you're kind of complicating something which probably doesn't need complicating.
That's true. It's very true. And actually, Jean's built on the question in another question. The statement is: we need soil scientists involved, not people pushing products. Farmer networks are great, but don't always know the best evidence. They recently had an advisor telling farmers to dump iron on their soil. We need to have independent expert soil and regen ag advisors freely available to farmers. Adam, is that something you'd welcome, or would you rather do a suck it and see approach and do your own research and go that way?
Yeah, I think I'm a bit like David. Soil's such a natural thing, and as you get more in tune with it and you start learning how it works and how it reacts to various things you do to it, you can tell when it's improving. And I know testing and all this sort of thing is helpful, especially if we want to start selling carbon credits or anything like that to show improvement. But on the ground, as a farmer, it's more of just a gut feeling thing. And I know that probably is a lot more too simplistic from the sort of answer people wanted, but you just start feeling it. I can't really explain it, but you just sort of get it.
That's good. No, I mean, look, gut instinct and intuition takes us a long way, and you're from a family of farmers for generations, and so therefore these things come through. But it links into my next question, really, which was raised this morning, and this is about how we have best practice sharing. Farmers, I've worked with lots of farmers, and I'll tell you a story of one of them. I went to advise one farmer on sustainability. It was about heating, and I said, "How's it going?" And he said, "Yeah, good. Just invested in a Nubity kit. I'll show you, but you're not to tell anyone. It's top secret. No one else has got it." So I looked at his Nubity kit, and I think it was a seed drill. I can't remember, and it was decent. And then I went to the farm next door, And I said, how's it going? Oh yeah, I've just invested in a new bit of kit, but don't tell him next door. And then he showed me the same bit of kit. Like, there's clearly no conversations happening. How can we use networks? How can we even embrace modern networks to ensure that best practice is shared amongst you all? And I'll go to David with that first.
So I've already mentioned the HDV and the monitor farms, which I've been involved with, and that was a real game changer for us. We actually started going to the monitor farm about the same time as we started down the sort of regen route, and there was a couple of other farmers on there on a similar journey, and just the ability to get farmers into a room, just one-to-one, having a chat with each other, comparing what they do, and that's what quite often triggers a lot of people to change, more than actually an expert standing in front of them trying to impose it onto them or anything like that. It's actually a fellow farmer has done something and you think, well, that's worked, okay, I'll give it a go, and then finding it out for yourself. And there's other great organizations out there. I mean, BASE is another one which Adam and I are involved with, and they're it's a collection of like-minded farmers, really regenerative farmers that share information and share ways of doing things, and that's, to me, has been that's where I've learned the most in our journey is from other farmers.
That's brilliant. So these peer-to-peer collaborative networks are much better than a top-down, this is how you do it.
Yeah, but it's
sorry, David, you finished that.
I was just going to say it needs facilitating, and because it does sort of happen naturally, but in an organised way, it needs facilitating, and that's where these sort of independent organisations come in, and they're really key.
Brilliant, thank you. And Adam, what are your views on that?
Yeah, totally agree. These independent organisations getting farmers together, even for, like the farming forum, that's just another way another facilitator to organise discussion. And it's funny what you say about the two farmers buying a drill. I've actually bought drills with a neighbouring farmer. So we're because we could see the cost. We could see there was a cost saving. We could see we both didn't need the same thing. So yeah, that's quite a good example there.
I like that whole idea of a collaborative economy. That whole idea of sharing and grouping resources. That feels good. Emma and Ian, have you come across? Is there anyone near you where you can share that kind of investment?
We are a little island in the middle of intensive
green desert, surrounded by green dairy desert. The thing is, I think the problem with agriculture is for many years that there's always been that sort of I call it fence looking over your neighbour's fence and saying, well, I wouldn't have done it like that. And there's almost this, to get two farmers to talk was impossible. We've got a network locally, part of the Pendle Hill Farmers Network, and it's great. The Zoom meetings are good, they're constructive. It's a group of everyone's farming slightly differently, but everyone has the same goal. They want to do the best for the soil. They want to do the best for the environment. So it's a like-minded goal that brings a very different group of people together, and I think that's like David and Adam said, they are the best places to start, really, definitely.
That's brilliant, thank you. And I was struck, Adam, one of the things that you said earlier, and I really liked the modesty and I really like the co-creativity that was embedded within this statement. You talked about, someone was asking questions about bringing animals back onto your site, and you rightly said, I don't know anything, I'm paraphrasing, Adam, I know nothing about animals, but other people do. So I'd actually rather co-project with them. I would rather bring them in to look after that. Do you see partnerships like that becoming more and more effective? And is it a win-win for you both?
Yeah, I think so. I like cooperation. I'm involved with a big grain storage cooperative actually as well. Lots of farmers working together on that, and you can't be good at everything. Some people are good at something, some people aren't. Some people are good at other things. It's just how it is. And I found when I've tried to do things that I'm not that passionate about or that I don't really get, then I do a bad job on it. So it's better to work with people who do a good, fantastic job on it, and together up you go. happy days.
I like that. And Harry, from your perspective and your background, I mean, you've been involved in so many farms. Have you seen much of this cooperative stuff work before, or is it the time now?
My opinion is that for this to really get hold and to do what we all want it to do, collaboration has got to be the #1 key to it working. Because as you say, Adam, you can't be an expert in everything, and why would you want to be? You're good at what you do, and hopefully you can use other people or other enterprises to help you to make your journey go further on. But if you've been doing arable all your life, I'm sure to change and to try and get into beef or any other animals is going to be awkward, and it's going to take a long time. Whereas if you have someone who really knows what they're doing, then the most important thing is you're going to save a hell of a lot of time, and probably also you're going to save yourself a lot of money, because he has made all the mistakes previously. He's ironed them out, and you're taking advantage of what he has learned. So #1 is collaboration has got to be at the heart of it. And I do find to a certain extent that there is an awful lot of siloing that goes on. People kind of learn something and say, oh, I'm going to keep that. I'm not going to tell anybody. And even in our own short little Springfield Agri journey, we've found a huge amount of siloing where people don't want to share. Whereas you think it's the most obvious thing in the world is that you share this information, because for the industry as a whole and for the country as a whole, then the sooner we can arrive at this destination, the better. But that has to be through collaboration as much as we can, and forget all this siloing, because it only benefits a very small number of people for a short period of time in a very small way. So, but my finding is that we still have some siloing, and the sooner we can get those doors all opened and everybody in the same kind of entrance hall, the better.
That's interesting. That's a really great answer. Thank you. Ian and Emma, anything to add to that?
No, I think it's fairly sort of summed up there, what Harry said. I do think, we need to get together. People need to sort of collaborate and more of that. But no, I have nothing really to add to that.
Okay, but we had a very specific question for you two, or that I think applies to you two, actually, which I'll deal with now, and then we'll move back into kind of how DEFRA can change. But we had a really specific question about pesticides in organic, and Frederick Wilson asks, can you explain the role of pesticides in organic farming?
Yeah, I think I'm going to have to use a phrase that Emma's dad coined many years ago about organic. When he was asked what's organic, he said, well, it's not what's in it that matters, it's what's not in it that matters. And it's quite a nice phrase. Now, pesticides, if I was to say they're not used in organic, is a complete lie. They are. But they are normally naturally occurring, so mineral, plant, animal-based treatments. I think in the UK is around just short of 500 approved chemicals for use in agriculture, of which less than 30 are used in organic farming. Now, of those 30, there is only one that is not naturally occurring, and that's a pheromone-based treatment that's used in insect traps to actually sort of disrupt breeding seasons of certain insects. So it's a bit of a preventative. I mean, the thing about organic, a lot of it is about prevention rather than cure. So if you can stop something happening, and use sort of different management techniques, crop rotations, there is an element of manual work, isn't there? The amount of summers we've spent walking up the pasture with a couple of bottles of beer and a couple of spades and digging up large thistles and turn them over, and 3 days later they're dried and the cows eat them. But we don't spray them, so it's quite nice on a summer's evening to take that walk up, look across at Pendle. I think like I say, the main difference is using preventative measures, not treatments. I mean, when you think it took nearly 70 years, or just over 70 years actually, for us to realise that DDT was a problem, and it took a further 20 years, to really sort of get the ban, worldwide. And it's quite concerning because we're seeing, increases in a lot of things. I mean, in the last 20 years, glyphosate has increased 400%, or the use of it has. And I think we sit and ask ourselves the question. We took the decision 7 years ago to go antibiotic free. Now, when the vet spoke to us, Neil said there is absolutely not a hope in hell's chance of a dairy herd being antibiotic free. You just cannot do it. Well, rather than sort of heed his advice, that's gauntlet down to us, and we started to look at what did Emma's parents do, what did Emma's grandparents do, before antibiotics were around. How did they manage the cows? How did they, sort of prevent mastitis and other issues? And it was really by looking back that we found a future. And 7 years on, here we are. I'm not saying we haven't used antibiotics on the farm. We have used them in sheep, and we've used them in the odd calf, because calves are very delicate. But they're nothing that's providing milk, has been treated for 7 years. And what we're hoping is, as the younger generations come through, we create a bit of a super cow that has, great resistance, because it's not being suppressed all the time with antibiotics. It's growing a natural resistance to many of the bugs it's susceptible to. I think on our journey, a lot of the time people have looked at what we do and said, farming's not going to go backwards. You need to catch up with the times. And I think our answer has always been, no, it won't go backwards. It has to come full circle, because we cannot afford, for it not to come full circle. Planet's 4.6 billion years old. If you liken that to a 46-year-old human being, we've done more damage to our soil in the last 2 seconds than in the whole rest of time. Now's the time we've got to wake up, we've got to act, and we've got to do it.
Brilliant, absolutely brilliant. And we've got another question, and it rolls straight off the back of that, actually. So it's from Charles Ross, who's a friend of mine, really good guy. Question to all: what could the government do to assist the switch to regen ag? He gets the feeling that a carrot is better than a stick. And I'll go first to David.
Thanks, Mark. Yeah, I think we were talking about elms earlier. We know this policy is coming. We're not entirely sure of the detail yet or the funding levels, but I think that the philosophies that we're following they're not too complex. There's some principles which you need to follow. There's links between what we're doing with what organic farming methods. But I think that the key thing for the government to do to encourage this to happen, and the carrot is the right way to go, as he says, is to make sure that the policy is firstly funded to a level which people are going to actually do it. There's been levels in the past which it's just not worth the hassle of doing it. And secondly, the policies have got to be pragmatic in the fact that they've got to work. They've got to accept that farming and the environment can work together. Rather than saying, right, we're just going to have some habitat in the corner of that field over there, and that's going to be our bit for the environment, and then having the field where we're going to grow the food. That's not how it should work. With the whole system, you should have a farm that's as diverse as possible. It's not diverse with just habitat. It's diverse with cropping, with what's within that cropping. How you look after it. It's the whole philosophy needs to change, but government can make a big contribution to getting that to happen by having a policy that's going to, encourage the two things to work together.
I like that idea, and I really love that analogy. And we're seeing the same thing in the environmental business world. The end of CSR, spending 10% of your budget over here so that everyone ignores 90% of what you do over here, towards CSV, creating shared value, where every pound, dollar, euro, yen is spent really, really well, doing beautiful things. When I was head of sustainability for ASDA about 20 years ago, and I was given the tiniest budget and told not to get in anyone's way. That was pretty much the approach to sustainability then. It's not like that now. I'm told it infiltrates everyone and they're all greenies in suits, apparently. But that's the kind of approach that you've described, and I really like that. Adam, what about from you? What could government do to kind of hasten this shift towards regenerative agriculture? And should you be paid to do it? Because as a carbon sink, as a flood defense, all of those amazing things Harry talked about in his great presentation earlier, they have economic value that aren't currently being internalized. What would you recommend?
Yeah, there is certainly a lot of value to many of the things we do that is unaccounted for, especially with these farms that are flooded in order to save towns and stuff. They should should be recompensed for that, really. Again, it goes back to what I said earlier. It's making everything work within the farming system, and it's got to be seamless and easy to do. Not easy in terms of, it's a box ticking exercise and you get some money, but it can't get in the way of what we're trying to do with Regen Ag. And I think by pushing people, or not pushing people, but by suggesting to people that you can farm like this, if you grow these cover crops or you do this, then you'll get a bit more money, a top up, or so to speak. That will push people more into the way of doing it, rather than saying, take half your farm out of production and you can do something on the rest and you can get some money. But farmers are farmers, they want to be farming, and they might have to change a bit, change what they're doing, or sell a plough. But it's not the end of the world. They can learn and carry on farming, which is what we've all been doing anyway.
Can they? Is there an appetite for change, and has the shift away from obviously the European Union, but also the realization and widespread understanding of climate change, have those things proved a big enough sort of driver to shift entrenched thinking? I'll go to Ian and Emma with that, and then to Harry. Actually, Harry will have an input there.
I think policy can create appetite for things, and thinking about how the single farm payment to the basic payment scheme, how it's changed over the years. Paying someone because they have an entitlement, or they own an entitlement, and they farm, rent, own a hectare of land. To me, is utter madness. It's money for nothing, and there is no condition on what that money is spent on. I know a chap not so far away. He doesn't farm; he rents his land out, and his basic payment is in excess of £100,000 a year. Doesn't need to work because he's got a great income from nothing. But to me, these are public goods: water quality, soil quality. These, we might look after them. We might actually technically own the land, but they are public goods. They have to be looked after for the public good, and that's what we should be rewarding farms for, is actually looking after these, and those that are doing it well, the water quality and soil quality. Don't pay someone for doing nothing. Encourage them to do something else. We laid 2,900 meters of hedge last year. Yes, it's expensive, but the habitat that is created and the boundaries that are now thriving, to me, it was a no-brainer. We haven't done as much this year as we'd like to do, but there's always next year. But again, it's a case of doing that. We use our basic payment to actually fund environmental projects on the farm, because I feel guilty about receiving something that really, why should I get it? The steel industry is on its backside. It needs a cash injection. But if in 30 years we were still pouring cash into it, the public would have the right to say, hang on a minute, we should not be funding food prices and food policy in this fashion. There needs to be environmentally led funding, and pricing is a whole different issue, but it is an issue.
That's a question I was going to ask, but maybe I won't, because I think it's a tricky one, and that's just around whether the problem is the consumer is getting subsidised food prices, and they're just not paying the full price, and therefore not valuing, with a third of the food that we grow not making the factory because it's out of spec, and a third of that not being eaten. The fractions don't work well for us. But Harry, I'm really interested, because you've got this much more global kind of helicopter review from all of the roles that you've done. What should government be doing to spur on and accelerate this shift?
For me, it is quite simple. When Obama left office in America, he had a group who tried to put a figure on how much a ton of CO2 produced would cost somebody somewhere in the world. And at that stage, it was $50. So that every ton of CO2 that was produced, whether it's by a cement works, whether it was off agricultural soil, didn't matter, it would cost someone in the world $50 to put it right. If you then take that and say, well, we have committed ourselves to net zero by 2030. We have 410 parts per million of CO2 in our atmosphere today. For us to stay at less than 2 degrees C rise in temperature, it has to be at 350. So there is no predictions by anybody in any form or fashion that says we're going to achieve that. And so therefore, the chances are that 2 degrees might become 5 degrees by the end of the century. And at 5 degrees, well, we could talk about it all afternoon, what would happen, but it would be very, very unpleasant for anyone who's left on the planet. The only thing
4 degrees is a 7 meter sea level rise. 4 degrees is the Greenland ice sheets melting. So 5 degrees, and if you're below 7 meters, you're gone. Yeah, that's terrifying.
It's absolutely terrifying when you talk about what's happening in terms of fires, etc., etc. It's not a very good scenario. The only thing that I see that actually can not only stop this but also reverse it is by taking the carbon from the atmosphere and putting it back into the soil. We have government talking about, oh, we can have, we can suck it down with a big machine and we can then pop it down a pipeline and stick it under the North Sea. Is that really just not close to madness, that is the way forward? But regenerative agriculture and using photosynthesis, which is the method that nature provided to keep the carbon balance, it is possible that actually we could take that CO2, we could take it out of the atmosphere, and we can actually get to a point where that figure of 410, which we are today, could actually start to decrease. Now, that would have to be on very much a global scale. And if you looked at just the UK, what we could do here, we produce 360 million tons of CO2 from what we do on our islands. If we had regenerative agriculture working on the 10 million acres that we've got in England, then actually we could probably sequester somewhere around about 110 million tons. So at least a third of the problem has, we could do something about it. So if I was the government, then I'd be saying, okay, he who pollutes, you pay. He who sequesters, you get paid. And not much more difficult than that. All right, you go into the semantics of how do you measure it, etc., etc. I think we will find that by the time we get to the end of this year, we will have a system by which that could be sequestered and a system by which farmers could get paid for doing it.
Absolutely. The technical challenges of that are much slimmer and much easier to solve than the policy shift that's required. Look, we've got about 2 minutes left, and we've had a great couple of questions from Chris Erasmus and from Maud Goldberg. I'm going to go with one of those because I fear we might not have time for both. So Chris asks, how do we get this message out to consumers? Is this do we need Hugh Fearnley-Whittinstall marching through the fields, picking up friable soil, or what? How do the consumers make a decision and a choice to support better farming? And I'll go first to Ian and Emma.
I'll try and keep it really brief. It's education. It is purely education. Some of our best marketing emails are about sustainability and about what we do differently. And it's as simple as that. Education, education, education. Once people know, they shop differently. I'll keep it as brief as that because there are others that would like to come in on that.
Brilliant. So once they know, they'll change their own mind. David?
I sort of take a different tack to that, actually. I think there is a proportion of the population that will be a discerning consumer, but actually the majority just buy cheap. And I think the only way we can change this is for government to assume the responsibility of society to get our farming systems to change, because I think the majority of people, I'm not sure if they really care enough.
That's interesting. Okay, so there's awareness is one thing, motivating people to do something different. Look, we've all got used to super cheap stuff. I'm 52. When I was little, chicken cost more per pound, per kilo, in my opinion, than it would cost now. And when my granddaughter, who's 1.5, when she gets to my age, the maths would have changed significantly because we haven't internalized these externalities. Adam.
I didn't really hear the question because my internet dropped out. Sorry.
That's okay. It's how do we motivate the consumer to ask for different and better? And we'll just leave this as the last answer.
It's a very difficult one from my situation. Again, like David, I'm a commodity grow commodities. So, but I guess I don't know. I don't know. It's trying to engage with people, trying to get people passionate about things. But I'm skeptical. You know, we all know people lots of foodie people, but there's also a lot of people who don't care.
So we need to shift those that don't care, and we need to make everybody more aware of what they're eating and what good or harm it does. Look, thank you. We have loads more questions, and I'm really sorry to finish there. You've all been amazing. I've really enjoyed that conversation, and I feel a little bit more secure knowing that the future is in your hands. And Ian and Emma, it's going to be another 500 years at least, I'm hoping. So thank you, Harry. Thank you, David. Thank you, Adam. Thank you, Emma. Thank you, Ian. The rest of you, if you hop over to the main agenda, next up at 20 past, well, that's now, we've got Circular Economy, a Global Perspective with Dr. Stefanos Foltio, and I'll be back for the panel after that. Thank you.
Thank you.